It was noontime today in the center of Beijing when a man walked to the middle of the Avenue of Eternal Peace,
Well, all right. Welcome back to the Survival and Basic Badass podcast. Well, two is one and one is none. That's a pretty common phrase in the military. I think they actually give credit that it kind of came from the SEALs, but I know we used to hear it all the time in the Navy. And, it comes down to redundancy. Or maybe you look at it as don't put all your eggs in one basket. That's what it comes down to. People seem to have one fallback plan. And, Kevin, you probably haven't seen this, but life doesn't always go according to plan. We always think that things are going to go smooth and work out the way we want to, but it doesn't always go that way. And having a little bit of a backup, a little bit of a redundancy, one of the backups to help build the podcast awesome, I would say. Make sure you guys like, subscribe, that kind of thing. It always helps because, grows the channel. You have somewhere to find us. Maybe you join the email list at survivalandbasicbadasspodcast.com, because then when we get booted off YouTube because Kevin says too many offensive things, redundancy, you know how to find us, right? The backup. You have the secondary. But that's kind of what it comes down to, is it's always important to be able to have a backup plan. In the military, it was always, have a backup plan. I worked for a big corporation, and we have like assembly lines, and it's basically a bunch of separate machines, but every other machine, we have like a storage area where it kicks out overflow. So if they're running slow up front and we're fast in the back or not enough coming from the back, you have that. All right, they're running too slow up front. So we keep making engines, and we'll kick them off to the side, and we'll have 20 sitting there. So then when one of the previous machines breaks, you have 20 to draw from to keep going and keep things moving. It's always that backup of, well, if things go wrong, what do we do? And it's so important when it comes to prepping. And I guess it really comes down to what are the most important goals that you have, the most important things. Like, we talk about, food, water, security, shelter, these kind of things. Having a backup to each one of these, or another way, is going to be huge in the longevity or probability of your survival, right? All that matters, your backup income, right? Like, why do we have a savings account? Money set aside. Well, because you don't know. Why do we store food? Because you don't know what could be coming. And it's that backup, in a way, just having any food storage when your normal plan is, hey, I go to the grocery store and now the grocery store, I can't get there because there's a giant snowstorm. Having that redundancy of, well, I still have a pantry full of food here. We're going to be okay.
Right.
That's what it comes down to. Kevin, you've heard it in the military. What are your thoughts? 2 is 1, 1 is none.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that goes for a lot of situations in a lot of places. I work in water treatment, and there's always double of everything. You know what I mean? Nobody wants to be out of water because your equipment doesn't work. Nobody wants to be out of water because the power went out. There's always backups. There's always two. There's always generators. There's always something to keep things moving, when equipment goes down. And I think that's important for almost all aspects of your life. It's always good for you to have a shitty shitbox car, have a beater around. If your car breaks down and has to go to the shop, you can still get back and forth to work.
That's, I mean, we find, I mean, obviously, when you're at the starting out point in life, you limited on what you can do, right? But having that extra vehicle, now it's cool that you can be at the point in life where it's the old muscle car you're rebuilding, or the, the old pickup truck or whatever, it can be something a little bit fun, but also just having that, maybe it's that $400 1989 Honda Accord, that you have sitting in the back, depending where your budget is, right? But having that extra, I had a deer hit my truck not that long ago, and they wanted to take it to the shop for 2 or 3 weeks. And, that's the kind of thing that when they take it for 2 or 3 weeks, you need a rental car. Oh, you got to come in and
you're spending $2,000 to get your car fixed and $5,000 on a rental car for 3 weeks.
Exactly. But wait, no, I have the old pickup truck that I can just drive that to work and it's not a problem. That's the kind of thing, right? Having that backup. Another thing is preppers, we don't know exactly, there are things we prepare for, right? We plan for bad weather to come. We plan for, the government collapse. We can plan for the financial system to collapse. We plan for China and Iran to come and mess with us, and EMPs and earthquakes and God to come back. Whatever happens, you don't know, right? There's a million disaster scenarios that can come and affect your life. But by having several systems in place, we can be prepared for any eventuality that happens, but also not just the different things that might happen, but also like they'll be protected, I guess, the stuff. It'll be, safe somewhere. So maybe I have all my stuff stored in the basement and then we get a big flood, oh, well, that wiped out that scenario, right? That's the kind of thing you have to think about, the different possibilities. Maybe I had it all in the attic and the house caught on fire and I couldn't get it out. I mean, it's, you can always say, well, Chuck, I would never put it all in the basement because that's, the flooding. I mean, yeah. And then, but there's always something, right?
Right. Exactly.
And that's why redundancy is key.
Let's like setting up some, say you do have a house fire, say you can't get to your house, say, you have to evacuate your house. Let's talk about doing some hidden caches.
I like hidden caches.
I know we've I know Chuck has gone through a few of these different hidden cache test runs and probably maybe even has some out there. I myself have some hidden spots. One of the ones that I like is PVC pipe. You fill it with your stuff, canned foods, whatever it is, and throw a rope over a branch, pull it up into the trees. You know what I mean? Maybe paint it brown so it blends in a little bit. PVC comes up a lot because it's one of those things that you can really seal up. You can leave it out in the weather without water and rodents and stuff getting into it. They have the PVC with the threaded, with the threaded caps where you can just you can seal up one side, glue it closed, and the other side with a threaded cap and bury it, and you're going to be good to go to dig it up. And there's a lot of different ways to hide your hidden caches. Burying is the most secure, but there's really a limited time on how long something can stay underground before it starts decomposing.
Absolutely.
Most of the containers that you're going to use are going to they're going to get infiltrated with water, and it's going to destroy all your stuff.
Well, again, it's the redundancy though, right? So you're filling the 5-gallon bucket with a lid that you bury in the woods, but maybe you put everything in Ziploc bags inside of that. Or, and again, it's a redundancy in preparation. You know, maybe you put some mothballs in there. I know they smell gross and it's probably not what you want to do to your preps, but you know what I mean? You put something in there for a little extra protection. Everything you do
That's right.
to keep it safe is going to help it. And that's that whole system of redundancy. You know, I've seen a lot of people will buy like the surplus military containers, you know, that seal tight and lock, and you can put a padlock on them, and they'll have you know, rubber gaskets, that kind of stuff. I always see them for
ammo
$200-300
containers are
bucks.
great for those. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, metal ammo cans can rust, plastic don't, but metal's a little bit sturdier. I mean, again, you think of the different things, right? Maybe you have a 55-gallon drum with a sealable lid and you fill those metal cans inside. Again, redundancy. That's the kind of thing.
Even if
But
something gets into
PVC,
through the plastic, you still have containers, you know. I think what you want to do with a lot of these when you're storing food like that, you want food that's ready to eat. You know what I mean? Like rations. You don't want to pull it out and then you have to boil pasta and, you know, do all sorts of stuff. You want stuff that you can access and eat right away, you know. But things like, you know, that are in cans, metal containers, or, you know, its own packaging that's going to keep it safe. Some of the other stuff you might want to have in there is water purification tablets, paracord, cold weather clothing like gloves and hats. You know, maybe you can't stick a down coat in there, but you can, you know, stick some stuff in there to keep you warm. First aid stuff, right? That's great to have in a hidden cache. Tools, you know, some of the basic tools you might need. You stuck a bunch of cans in there. Make sure you have a can opener too, you know. And then, you know, if you can get a couple of walkie-talkies that have a good distance, a good range on them, you know, you're way up on the list. You know, you're way ahead. When you're burying stuff, you want to have it. Go ahead.
All right. I think one of the things is information is key. You know, you mentioned the radios, but if you hear over the radio, hey, you know, FEMA's coming around knocking on doors, collecting supplies from people who are hoarding, that might give you that heads up. But also on the flip side of that, you know, because that always seems to happen in the prepper novels. But I got to say, if people are desperate, right, and, you know, things you don't know, maybe it's the gang of 10 people who live up the road from you, that house with all the drug people in it or whatever, and they come and rob you of everything, or FEMA comes and takes everything. If you had a hidden cache, like Kevin talked about, where you had some extra ammo and guns, you had some survival food, you had, you know, some stuff set aside, that one more layer set back, at least that didn't get taken away, and then you're desperate. You know, that's the thing, is that immediate preparation and communication. That warning, that early advance warning system is going to be awesome if you know things are coming. But, you know, that's one more thing to plan for, you know, because right now we have traditional communication. We have the internet. I turn on the news. I have rabbit ears on my TV or whatever. I don't even think they work anymore, but you know what I mean, right? That would be a thing that, you know, I have all these ways to get updated in news, but having the backup of an additional radio set aside, one that I know is got a crank charger, or the batteries are going to be good, or something like that, right? That's one more layer of protection that I have there.
Right. Other stuff, other ways you can hide some of the stuff though is, you know, when you're burying something, maybe bury it under a structure, you know, bury it under a porch or a deck, or bury it right next to a fence post, and that way you can find it. You know, that's a big one, is you don't want to lose the stuff. You know what I mean? You can't find it yourself. Nobody else is going to find it, but you're not going to be able to get it when you need it. Right. And then you can use like natural stuff, you know, like rock crevices and caves and hollowed out logs, hidden compartments in furniture. You know, everybody knows where there's like an old junk car somewhere, or, you know, an old couch that somebody threw out on the side of the road. You drag that up into the woods a little bit and hide something under there. but you want to have a location that's easy to access when you need it, right? You don't want to
Absolutely.
have something that's buried 10 feet in the ground that you have to hike up a mountain to get to, you know? You want to be able to have stuff that you can access yourself.
And the thing is, too, you might want to think about, you don't want it to be 5 feet behind the back door of your house, because if your house is overrun and you don't have access to that,
right, you're not going to be
5
able to get.
feet might be hard to get to, right? But if it's right back at the property line behind a tree, maybe that's a little bit better. I mean, even better if you have 5 acres and it's up the road. I know Kevin had always talked about that maybe a mile up the road from his house, he has a 55-gallon drum buried, by a tree, and has that stash. So, and I mean, maybe you make a 20-mile road trip all the time, and on the daily, and maybe 10 miles away from your house, you
And
bury a little, a little cash,
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Yeah. And there's always, there's, you don't have to bury it. You can just camouflage stuff, you can have it in a stand of trees in a Rubbermaid bin that's got a tarp over it, buried in, leaves. There's a million ways to hide stuff. And, obviously the smaller it is, the easier it is to hide. But, you want to have stuff that you can access and can be usable long term.
Exactly. Another secret of the pros is, if you're going to be burying stuff on a cloudy day, and maybe you're somebody who's on the government's radar because you're kind of a psycho, you might want to do it on a cloudy day. Just saying. Maybe people aren't as watching as close on a cloudy day. If you had like a crazy prepper podcast or something like that, I'm just saying it might be a little bit harder for them to find. Just saying that's a thought.
Right. Now, I mean, as preppers, I think basic mindset, our mindset is that, you want to have, right? You want to have, that's why we're storing extra food. That's why we're storing, extra gas. We're storing extra stuff. You just want to be careful that you're not storing all that stuff in the exact place, right? Because that's really if you have a house fire, you lose everything. Even units are great for this, there and go open it up and get in and out of there and stuff like that. But you're not going to be able to access that. And generally speaking, those storage units are pretty damn safe.
Right.
You have to keep up with monthly payments, which we all saw that show where they go and bid on it because you're not been making your payments, but you just got to keep
it.
up
I mean, it can add up quickly, but maybe at your job site, right? Maybe you work somewhere and you could keep some stuff there. Maybe you keep a get home bag in your car and it's a little bit better stock than you would have otherwise, that kind of thing. You can have a little bit there. It's all this stuff in different places. Now, that's the thing too. You want to look at maybe, redundancy means a bug out location, a fallback, depending on the scenario that comes up. You don't know what to plan for, right? Maybe being in the city is okay for one disaster, but maybe you need to get out to the country for another disaster, right? Sometimes being by people and civilization is a good thing. I can't imagine what that scenario would be, but I mean, I've heard that people are helpful. I don't know. It's never been my experience, but it could be. Another thing, maybe, take the opportunity to help your family out, right? So when you buy them Christmas gifts, maybe you buy them a little long-term food. They'll curse you a little bit, like, that crazy prepper. Why did he give me this? Why did mom give me this? Why would she think I'd ever need it? And then they'll stick it somewhere and forget about it. But then when it's there, they'll be like, you know what? That was pretty cool of them. I'm just saying. Tupperware, protecting your stuff, right? If you're storing stuff, it's important to like keep it safe, right? You hate to invest hundreds of dollars, and it doesn't always have to be like thousands of dollars or whatever, but it would be good if you had like $100 worth of preps. That would be a good idea, right?
Right.
But maybe keep it safe, right? It sucks when mice get in and destroy all that toilet paper you've been hoarding for COVID part 2, right? But hopefully that doesn't happen. Right. But you don't want mice and rodents, and you need to have a way to protect that. But again, you don't have it all in one giant Tupperware container, because then when you open it, it's like, oh, something, moisture got in here, and look, it's all moldy. Or, because you don't know. What is it they always say? You don't know what you don't know. And that can be dangerous.
Right.
So it's important to have multiple plans. We always think we have the best plan, and then things kind of can go sideways.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's really what happens, is that you're all set, and then something goes wrong, and you realize, oh, I have 500 candles. The power went out. I have 500 candles. No
exactly.
lighter,
you have all the canned food, but no can opener, right?
Right. You've got 100 flashlights and only one battery. That's the sort of stuff, though, that the little emergencies kind of help you.
Exactly.
And I mean, a lot of people think that as a prepper, you're waiting for doomsday and the apocalypse and stuff. But I mean, it could be something as simple as losing your job, or the snowstorm where you can't leave your house and the power went out. Now you have to worry about freezing to death. There's a lot of stuff that a lot of little things that happen to you that these preps can really benefit you. You can really prepare yourself for the small stuff that can go wrong. And, small stuff goes wrong all the time. And most of the time you can walk right past it. But sometimes those small things cascade into bigger problems.
Absolutely. No, we can always
it's really easy to, to get sick and go to the doctor and, get all fixed up. You eat something bad and it gets salmonella and you go to the doctor. No problem. You cut your hand open and you go to the doctor and get a couple of stitches. No problem. The urgent care, it's right up the street. The emergency room miles from here. But when you can't access those places and you have a little emergency like that, it can turn into a big disaster if you can't handle those situations with what you have on hand.
Right. And that's the thing. And so, I mean, you touched on, medical things, right? The cut on the hand becoming something bad. The same thing, I think it comes down to, as preppers, having redundancy in training is another big thing. Turns out dad being the only person who knows how to work a gun or whatever, that's kind of a problem. Dad being the only one who knows first aid, mom being the only one who knows how to cook, whatever it is, whatever the role is, I don't mean to be all stereotypical there, of who's doing what. Maybe mom's the only shooter, right? But if there's only one person, then you have a problem. And especially when you get into like mutual assistance groups, that kind of thing, having people and getting together and sharing that training and that knowledge is huge. Having a guy who, all right, you're our primary medic, but you've shown this other person, a bunch of medical knowledge and where supplies are, or, having other people, we did a video way back on having a bug out binder, or having just a home preparedness binder, I guess I called it, but something like that, right? That way, if I'm not home, somebody knows the steps to take. And that's if they're not involved. Hopefully they have the training, right? Hopefully they already automatically know everything. They can start the generator on their own. They can find the hidden caches, all this stuff. Having that in a binder, or having the redundancy of, hey, I don't want to write it down because it's our secret, but if you come back here, here's where I buried all the stuff. But you also don't want to show all the little kids, hey, this is where we buried the stuff. And then the government comes and they're like, it's over there. It's over there.
Yeah.
That ends bad too. But having that plan of redundancy and sharing the knowledge, that's a big thing. Having everybody be part of that security force. Everybody goes and trains on shooting. Everybody gets comfortable with a gun. You start to see these things when you hear about it, like, oh, there was big snakes overrunning the backyard. We didn't know what to do. Well, then you see that's a weakness in your plan, right?
Right.
That's somewhere where that training, needs to, because you see that it happens. You can't always be there. Now, obviously, you want to be the big protector, provider, and great, but you're a better protector when you train your family how to deal with things. Right. You're a better parent instead of handling all the things for your kid when you teach your kid how to handle things. And that is part of that redundancy, by teaching the people that you care about how to solve their own problems, teaching your kids how to prepare, teaching having your family store food and learn to stockpile. You don't need to worry about it, right? If your kid is away at college, but you've given your kid the knowledge to handle themselves, or maybe, they've learned self-defense and they, carry a handgun where they can legally go and whatever, that kind of thing. Hey, I don't have to worry about that one. He's got it covered. He's going to find his way and handle his own business. That's the best way to take care of your kids and your family. And that's part of that redundancy, is by everybody getting trained. And that's part of the beauty of it.
Right. Right. And, a big part of that is making sure your family members that live in different houses also have their own preps, and
exactly.
And like Chuck was saying, maybe they think you're a crazy person, and that's fine. But maybe bring them in a 10-pound bag of rice to keep in their cabinet, maybe just gift them some basics, give them some
you do what you can
stuff.
do.
Mm-hmm. And if you're worried about your kid that's, living in a different town that you feel like you might not have raised properly because they're a lazy asshole, maybe help out a little bit, maybe push them and guide them, push them in the right direction, and, help them out by giving them stuff. And, you know how it is when you're 20 years old, you can't afford a damn thing,
No,
you're just trying to
all.
survive. And so sometimes, a little help in those areas is a good thing to do. And as a parent, that's something you should be doing anyway.
Right. No, absolutely. I mean, our job is to always kind of nudge our kids in the right direction and get them going, and family. I mean, ultimately, everybody's responsible for their own self, right? I mean, that is what it comes down to. But as a parent, you always feel that obligation to take care of. And obviously, you have kids that at some point in your life, possibly that, can't handle their own business, right? A 2-year-old is not going to be able to go out and get food and whatever. They might be able to go to the kitchen and get food and work it out, but they're not going to provide their own shelter and heat and take care of things. But you do your best that you can do to train them, and then you kind of hope for the best, right? Because everybody still gets to make their own decisions in life. And that's the way it works, as people get to decide for themselves what's important and what they want. And all you can do is the best you can. But not to just get focused on kids. I'm just saying that training and redundancy, when you spread that around, there's a lot less to worry about. You're not desperate. I have to get to my kid's college and rescue them. No, it's a college-age kid who should be able to handle their own business, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly the goal, right? I'm not saying that's always true, but that should be the goal of what you want to do, right? Is get everybody prepared. And that's part of what we do as preppers is, encourage everybody to be prepared and get their stuff squared away so things work out for the best. Now, same thing, so we talked about food, shelter, water. So water, what are some things you could do? It's great if the water comes in on the pipe and we can just go to the hose and turn it on, but maybe that doesn't always work, right? So maybe we have the backup well or the stream or the something like that. Maybe the water catchment we set up with some barrels out the back. Maybe we just store a bunch of bottles of water on our property or in our car, right? That's the kind of thing. It's hot summer. I'm doing a big road trip and I'm going somewhere. It's 100 degrees out. Maybe I put bottles of water in the car before I make that long road trip, right? That's preparing and redundancy. Learning how, obviously, when we talk about the creek, that means, hey, maybe I need to take the steps to learn how to filter that water. We've covered, basic ways of doing it, but you need to plan into that redundancy. One of the tricks is I've been working on a solar well pump, right? Getting that worked out. And that's a way to do it, right? It's an additional, hey, the power might go out and I'll have a hard time getting it out of the ground. Now, mine, I can run a 5-gallon bucket down my well. Obviously, most well pipes are not that big and that's not an option, but that's an option I have where I am. But I chose the property based on certain features. And if it was, certain pluses I have helped make that work out great. And then obviously there's some shortfalls, of things that I need to bring in outside help or do things to, plan redundancy or plan food. It'd be great if I had an apple orchard and I could eat forever off my property, but I don't.
Right.
But I'm slowly working on those things. I planted peach trees and different things that would grow here because that's what we do is we learn to build in some resilience and redundancy. And that's really how you thrive.
Yeah, I think that's that's basically the heart of prepping when it comes down to it. Building a store of knowledge and a store of tools and goods that you can use in an emergency. And like every tool, it doesn't do any good if you don't know how to use it. You can have a whole lake full of water behind your house and you can't clean it out and you get sick and get more dehydrated because you drank the dirty water. There's a basic knowledge that can give you a big leg up when it comes to an emergency. There's basic information that you can learn and teach yourself. Yeah, I mean, YouTube is amazing for that sort of stuff.
It really is.
There's so much you can learn just, sitting down and spending 15 minutes listening to some dumbass drone on about, water purification or food.
Kevin, storage. You weren't calling me a dumbass, were you? I'm just checking. All right. So anyway, the thing is though, right? Like back to the redundancy with YouTube and something like that. That's a huge option. But do you have a couple of books that you threw on the bookshelf that cover a lot of these things? It could be as simple as having a Boy Scout manual, Boy Scout handbook, right? That used to cover a lot of the basics of first aid and whatever. One of the ones me and Kevin like is the SAS manual. That's something you might want to look into. They cover a lot of, plan identification and all the different things that you can do. But the idea is, hey, I have a backup if I don't have the internet, right? Or what do you do in the event of a nuclear disaster and now the internet's out and I don't know what to do to protect my family or where to go? This is part of that prepping, and printing out some of the knowledge or listening to a podcast and remembering some of that information. Those are the kind of things that are going to put you a cut ahead of everybody else. That's why I assume a lot of people listen to this podcast is you want to learn the different steps. That way it's in the back of your mind and it's here when an emergency comes up and you're able to take care of your family and step up when it's time. That's why you play out survival or situational awareness scenarios, is so that when something goes off, you can, hey, I know what to do. And you think about it quickly. Sometimes the obvious answer is right in front of you. But if you haven't learned and you don't know, you don't have that knowledge, you don't know what to do, to cover things and keep things going. So that's what I got. That's it, man. Just plan redundancy. 2 is 1, 1 is none. That's what we always were taught. And I think that's a good way to be. And it really is going to help you out in life. And even if that, setting aside a little budget, any of that kind of stuff. So if you have any ideas of things that, you could do, the little backups that could help out, be awesome if you put it in the comments, something like that. Things that could, help keep people going. Like I said, maybe join our email list at survivalandbasicbadasspodcast.com. Check that out. Check out the Facebook page, that kind of stuff. Maybe things like, my Patriot Supply. I'll put it in the links. It's things like that. You plan and you set aside and you get ready for the future. Show ideas, questions, comments. Email us at preppingbadass@gmail.com. Otherwise, I would say stay safe, and we will talk to you guys next week.